missing, right?
Yeah, based on what I'm looking at here, there are still some things missing. I do like how it's developing. So let me just run this over for everyone who's going to be watching this on video, kind of what we have right here. So this is what we're going to want with the simulation, is that you can come up here, put in your basic economic parameters. So we're calling it like GDP. Basically, we're talking about the number of seeds in circulation, how much our economy is growing, and then the active participants in our economy. Something that we do need to add is a cyclical growth of each one of these factors too, because this isn't fixed. You know, cycle per cycle, the number of people joining should be going up. Same with organizations and, you know, communities, right? So we do need another tab here where we're able to put in a variable for how much they're growing as well. So we have that for circulating seeds, the growth here, that's perfect, but we just need that same feature for all of this. So yeah, that's the first thing, is we're going to put in our economic assumptions and what our current economy looks like, and that's what's going to help, you know, serve as the foundation for this model. And then second, we're talking about how many seeds are removed from circulation. And this, we need the same thing, because it's also going to be variable and growing cycle per cycle. So the number of seeds destroyed cycle per cycle should be growing. It's not fixed at 10,000, right? So for each one of these things, we also need to be able to put in a variable that they're going to be adjusting each cycle as well. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So that's what we have as the second part, is we have our basic economic assumptions. We have how many seeds are getting taken out of circulation each cycle, how many seeds are being brought into circulation each cycle. So actually, I'll go over each element for the recording. So how many seeds are being destroyed? So, you know, making proposals using any of the escrow contracts, using any of the insurance contracts, the seed bank, like engaging with those contracts, all of these things burn seeds. So as the platform grows, the number of seeds relative to the number of users is actually going to grow as these services become more valuable and more used. So that's something that we're going to see. It looks more like a parabolic curve as the network grows. You know, marketing and the services provided there become more valuable, right? So anyway, these are seeds being destroyed, which are completely taken out of circulation and the total supply. But then we have planted seeds. So every new account that comes on has a fixed number of seeds that they have to plant as long as they're a member, right? So that's why, you know, up here in the GDP, we have number of accounts and how many number of people, but also how much it's growing. So if it's growing at, you know, 1%, then we have an additional 100,000 accounts coming on each cycle. So then the seeds removed is going to have to be increasing by at least 500,000 at a minimum, because they can't create a new account without planting 5 seeds, right? But then we're also going to have a variable rate, because you need to plant 50 seeds to be a resident. You need to plant 100 seeds to be a citizen. Okay, you also are planting more seeds because you want to increase your contribution score. So we're going to be able to grab averages of how much on average an account plants and be able to plop that in here so that we know how many seeds are being planted on aggregate each cycle. So this tells us how many seeds are being taken out of circulation. We have a wild card here. We're still debating whether or not we're going to play with this, because what we're tracking is our own economy and our own activity in our economy. So when seeds are sitting on an exchange, they're technically out of the economy. Those seeds can't be used for buying bread, you know, buying dinner, sending to a business, etc. They're sitting on accounts inside an exchange, and they're only really used for trading into other currencies, right? But these exchanges have a certain number of tokens typically that basically just sit there in total. So we need to find whatever that average is, and we can consider those taken out of circulation. But it gets interesting here because they can enter right back into circulation instantly. So that's why we have this thing called like an exchange rate. We don't want to consider, you know, 100% of these seeds taken out of circulation, because we risk high volatility if for some reason there's a black swan event and people move all of their seeds off the exchanges or whatever. So we're mitigating our risk by taking some percentage of those and considering them out of circulation. We don't know what that percent is. That's why we need a kind of model to find out what we're going to actually play with here. But that's the idea of actually considering seeds on an exchange as out of circulation as far as our economy is concerned. My yellow on my screen, I can't read this, so let's see here. Yeah, entering the seed bank, cool. Yeah, so seeds that are going into the seed bank, so closing contracts, those are also out of circulation. So this is really important because if our economy is not growing, the seed bank could not issue any more contracts. So we actually have control of that to say the seed bank's not going to put any of those seeds back into circulation. But when any contract is closed, meaning like seeds that the bank issued, someone paid back the seeds, they closed the contract, then those seeds went back out of circulation. So that's something that we're tracking here. So that's all the ways that seeds can be removed from circulation. They're destroyed, they're planted, they went into an exchange, or they went back into the bank. Any questions on that?
No, that makes sense.
And then to mirror that, we have seeds being introduced. So it's kind of the same thing. How many seeds were unplanted during that time? And this is something we're tracking and why the unplanting process takes 12 weeks. So it's slow, it's consistent, and we don't have high fluctuations, right? So someone can't plant 1 million seeds and unplant them overnight. That's going to take them 12 weeks to do it. So we're able to actually pretty seamlessly track how many seeds we can expect to come back into circulation from unplanting. So that's what we're going to put in here. You know, exiting exchanges, the same concept, seeds coming off of an exchange on average, and then exiting the seed bank. So that's what we're doing is we're saying how much is our economy growing? That's our baseline. How many seeds were removed from circulation? How many seeds were introduced back in? And all of that together is going to dictate how many seeds we actually grow during that cycle. So that's what we see up here. And then we get down to the second part of this is then how we're distributing those seeds that are grown. This is something else that's really important into the system. So right now we have 30% going to the GDC, which is the global decentralized cooperative. It's the one element that the entire network controls. So you can see that there's only one of them. And then it has its own buckets that we're putting to reserve for different things. So we have a bucket for, actually here, I'll actually show it to you. So we go down to GDC distribution. We have a bucket for network maintenance. So right now we're saying like 15%, but now we can look at that. So we can say, hey, if given these, economic criteria, we're growing at like a sustainable 2.5%. We have 724 seeds available per cycle for network maintenance. Is that too high, too low? How does that look? We have 20% going to regenerative grants. Cool. So we have, nearly 1 million seeds. What does that look like? We have 2 million for core development. So all of these things we get to test so we can find our economic assumptions and then decide if these numbers are too high, too low, and be able to play with it, right? We could also increase new buckets, but for starting, we have regenerative grants, we have interest-free loans, but it should also be just regenerative. So it's regenerative interest-free loans, and then core development and network maintenance. Network maintenance in our case is really, we're in a pretty privileged position because unlike most blockchains that have a overhead cost, they have to keep paying their block producers, miners, what have you, to continue to maintain the network. All we have to do, since we're a DApp on top of TLOS, is we don't have to continue to pay for network maintenance. All we need to do is reserve a certain number of, certain amount of bandwidth. We don't have to reserve more bandwidth unless we're growing. So we don't have that overhead cost. All we have is like a growth cost. Part of our growth has to go to acquiring more tokens to reserve more bandwidth. But if we start off with enough bandwidth to get from the get-go like we have a pretty large window before we actually have to start acquiring more. So we're in a pretty privileged position being a decentralized app over being our own blockchain because of that. Cool, so then the second aspect of that distribution is going into the bioregional decentralized cooperatives. So the same concept as the global one, but now for the bioregions. So the three things that we have separated into buckets is just regenerative grants, 25%, regenerative loans, and open proposals. But what we get to see here now is that, the main distribution, we're saying 30 is going to the core one and 20 is going to all the bioregions. But what this model is going to be able to tell us is that enough for bioregions? So if we have 100 bioregions and we're looking at it, and now we can say, okay, with 100 bioregions, each bioregion's getting 16,000 seeds each cycle for open proposals, and 8,000 for grants and 8,000 for loans. So they're getting 32,000 seeds per cycle in total. And a cycle, for those who aren't aware, is a moon cycle. So it's a little less than a month. So again, we get to look at this and say, all right, we've got 100 communities getting 32,000 seeds, and this is what that looks like. Something that still needs to be updated here is we got this first, middle, last. So right now it's showing them getting all the same amount, but that will change. It'll actually be on a percentile level. So the 99th percentile is going to get the most number of seeds, and the you know, 1th percentile is going to get the least number of seeds, right? And to kind of sum up what we've done there is we've removed the degrees of inequality from an infinite amount of inequality like we see in our today's economic system, where, you know, one community could be 1 million times more impoverished than another community. What we've done is we've restricted it to 99 degrees of separation. So the most wealthy community is only getting, you know, 99 times more than the most impoverished community. And what our assumption here over time is that this is actually going to decrease the global inequality. So relatively speaking, those poor communities are going to get relatively more value than the more expensive communities, or the more value, you know, wealthy communities. Even though objectively speaking, those wealthier communities are getting more seeds. What we should see, and if we don't see it, we're going to change our protocols, is that over time, those communities are actually converging and they're becoming more equal as they're getting relatively more equitable distributions. That was quite a big one. Does anyone have any questions on that concept? I'll run that one around.
No.
Cool. Yeah, and that's really what this model is for us to be able to find out, are these distributions right? Do they look good? What does our GDP have to be doing? You know, how much growth do we have to be maintaining in order to get, you know, enough for core development, in order to actually give enough rewards for communities for them to be enticed to participate and actually grow? How much value are individuals getting out of the system based on these assumptions, and how much organizations get, etc. So it's really helping us decide what these percentages ought to be and what targets we're looking for in order to have a really robust ecosystem and really rewarding ecosystem. So now I'm going to just talk. Is there any questions on this tool, what it ought to do, anything in general before I just touch on a little bit more of the features we want to add to it?
Just wanted to say I love the groupings in the UI. Definitely helps to kind of compartmentalize, you know, seeds in, seeds out. Definitely appreciate those upgrades since the last video. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's a huge upgrade. Yeah, I can definitely echo that. And changing it this way too. So you get the seeds grown, but then you see the compartments here. That just changing that around is a much easier way to conceptualize the whole flow.
For sure. Do you have any like parameter sweep or Monte Carlo, like, or are these all just like a hand, like change percentages and then run the simulation, take a look? Or I'm just curious if you have any other kind of like process batching simulation tool?
We don't. I want to, but I want to make sure that it's tailor-made to our economy and our assumptions and our protocols. But yes, we're going to need to build in those recursive protocols, so this is more accurate, but right now it's all manual. So everything you just kind of have to fill in with what we assume it will be. But I do want to make sure that once this is live, we're actually pulling that based off of real data that we're experiencing, not assumed data, and that it has an ability to be recursive and actually build on each other.
Cool.
That's something that I would love, you know, your kind of feedback in and your wisdom here to help us, you know, build into that next stage.
For sure. Yeah, I'm just the messenger. I'm definitely not the the one working in depth on these simulations in CAD or anything, but I definitely see some of the useful functionality there, and happy to carry over anything that might help.
Yeah, awesome. And just planting this idea, definitely for anyone who's listening, the whole way HIFA is set up is that we have a lot of value to distribute to other organizations who are participating in this development. So, you know, if you help us, if anyone who's listening to this, you, Jeff, as well, anyone who's helping build out these tools, adding either code or wisdom, what have you, we want to make sure, and we will make sure that we're reflecting that and giving you, you know, stake in seeds and stake in HIFA for helping participate and make this successful. So it's one of the benefits of building a financial system that's also philanthropic in nature, is we don't have to rely on goodwill. We're actually making sure that you get a financial reward in everything you do. Cool. Any other comments generally on this tool set? What What you might need or what you would like to see for this to be more understandable, is any of this confusing? Is the UI, the way it's set up, distracting? Like, is there any general feedback on how this tool looks and feels to be able to accomplish what I just outlined?
Yeah, I think just some like visualizing the data closer to the actual tables could be helpful. Anyways, there's some things that I'll be working with. Sebastian and I will be working with the developer
Okay.
to make sure they're easier to read. And
awesome. Okay, I'm just going to post this in the chat so then I can read over it. So the things that we need to add, so I'm just going to recap here, is again the percent that's being grown each cycle from each one of these tables, right? So that's important. And then the same thing for seeds being removed. These all need to be growing on a percent basis each cycle. So for every variable, it's going to need to adjust because there's no variable that's actually fixed. Every variable is going to shift on a percentage, from cycle to cycle. And then we need 2 other running totals. So right now we have seeds grown. What we're going to need to see is, well, actually 3. So maybe we can have a total economic, like little box up here that shows the total seeds in creation. So total seeds and then total seeds in circulation. So we're seeing all the seeds that exist, the total supply, and we're also seeing the circulating supply. And then we're wanting to see how many seeds are planted in total, so that this number is growing each cycle, presumably. And then how many seeds are burned in total, so that number is growing, presumably. So those 4 totals we want to be able to see at the top, left or somewhere, wherever you find them. The best place is just have these read-only totals. They're just demonstrating what's going on there.
okay. I mean, and you also wanted to have the actual breakdown, right? Not first, middle, and last, but the actual, I think 100.
Yes, so there's 99%, so there's 0 to 99, so there's 100 different buckets. I think it's fine if we show in quadrants, so we could see like the top 25, second 25, middle, like we do 4, so it's not too overwhelming, but still the backend needs to be doing all 100. And it's the same thing we're talking about, like displaying it too. We could start it off where we're only displaying it in quartiles, but how the protocols are actually working is in percentiles.
Okay. Okay.
Because again, that's something that I want to actually model and show, is that if we have 100 communities and they're in percentile basis, community A starts here in the 1 percentile and the 99th percentile starts here. And that's what we currently see in our world, is this huge degree of separation, right? What I want to see is over time, they actually start pulling themselves together. So we can run enough cycles and say, hey, in this new model, what we actually see is over time, it becomes more equitable and we reduce inequality across our globe by participating in this in a very slow transition way. That's something we want to prove and show and make sure that the protocols actually enforce. So we need to see the percentiles and the quartiles to be able to demonstrate that.
I mean, but
I have a question about that. It seems like that's a theory that this will improve, like that the inequality will get smaller. Mm-hmm. So why does it get smaller? By paying out more rewards to people like in a higher, I don't know. How does it work?
Here, simply, so we're in percentiles, right? So in a proof of stake system, for example, if I own 50% of the network, I get 50% of the rewards, okay? So I mean, that easily happens, and that's what we see. So a lot of proof of stake, Ethereum and Bitcoin on a Gini coefficient, which shows the inequality of systems. They're like 86. They're more unequal than the most unequal country, which is North Korea, which is like 0.85. So anyway, what we see is that they concentrate over time. Those with wealth get more wealth. So that's the standard model. But in ours, if you own half the network, like whatever, that's not even possible. Let's say you're getting, you control half the contribution. You're in the 99th percentile, right next to that person who owns 4% of the network, right? That's a simplified way of explaining it. So over time, since that 50% and that 4% is getting the same number of rewards because they're both sitting in the 99th percentile, the degree of inequality is actually going to shrink. because that 4% is getting relatively more, while that 99% or 50% is getting relatively less. Right, so it's actually going to bring them closer together. Right now, we have a global situation where people are 1,000 degrees, 10,000 degrees, 100,000 degrees of separation. Like you're talking about the poorest communities in the world versus most wealthy. Like the degrees of inequality is vast. What we're doing is actually shrinking that down to 99 degrees. So it's not purely egalitarian. It's still room for, you know, movement. But what we're doing is over time that, you know, poorer African community is getting relatively more value distributed to them than that European community, right? So we actually see that over time, they're going to get pulled closer together.
I see. Yeah, it's just like purely financial mechanics. It's just like, well, because of the mathematics, they're just becoming more equal.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool.
I mean, and we might even change it later on to say, okay, 99 degrees of separation is what we started with, or rather 100. We might upgrade the protocols 20 years from now to change it to 50. And now we only have 50. And then it just like further starts making it more egalitarian, you know? But anyway.
Yeah, it's good.
So just some questions there. I mean, so the things that would worry me there is that, like, you can have a bunch of small communities joining the network with very little value, very little proven value, and they could just be, you know, that there's an incentive there just to game the system and just to join because you're going to be getting free seeds. While the communities that are really adding value and really moving the project forward could be this, you know, could be bothered by some of these dynamics.
Great thought. It's not necessarily addressed here, but that's more objective metrics and what defines a bioregion. So you have to have a certain number of citizens that are already active in a bioregion before it goes live. And it's based on bioregions, so people can't arbitrarily set up a community or, you know, just decide they're their own community. So these are bioregions on the globe. So one small group, there's no one small group on the globe that controls a whole bioregion. So they can't actually be self-serving. They might be at the beginning until more people hear about it. But anyway, yeah, we have some objective metrics that a bioregion has to reach before we open it up to them to avoid that exact behavior that you're talking about. So they have to have 150 members, which is enough that you don't have collusion, or at least not too much collusion, before it actually opens up and they can start receiving and distributing value.
Okay. Okay. And the incentive would be to work together instead of having small bioregions, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, you know, initially, you know, if the limit is 150, every bioregion starts off. So, you know, you might have 5 people and they can see the money that's packing up in their bioregion, but it's not activated until they get to 150. So we actually create this incentive for them to like go and get more people to become citizens, because once they hit that threshold, now they can actually have access to this money. So we kind of give this like little reward for them to go out there and evangelize it and get it to that threshold. And then once they did the effort to get it to that threshold, they've already like kick-started the train engine, you know, and got the wheels moving. So that momentum would probably continue, especially as they get access to these funds and they start growing it, etc. So it creates this kind of like, you know, rebounding effect that keeps it growing. Okay.
I mean, just I you know, I think equality is great, but we just need to reward the people that will be adding the most value.
Yeah, definitely. And actually how we rank communities is not saying, okay, you're African, you're European. How we rank communities is based on their community contribution score. So this is how much they're interacting with seeds. So it could actually be that that African community I talked about is in the top percentile because they fully adopted seeds. They got on board, they're gung-ho, and they're doing like all of their interactions with seeds. They could be in the top percentile, while someone in Europe, maybe like, you know, 2 or 3% of their interactions are in seeds or something. You know, they could be in the bottom percentile. So I'm not actually saying, and I would, you know, radically change the, you know, the growth towards equality. When I'm saying, so yeah, that's how actually organization or bioregions are ranked. Same with organizations and individuals, by the way. Is how much economic activity and how much they're contributing. So that's what we're tracking here, is the contribution scores of all members of that community is what gives them this ranking.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is another thing to like entice them to grow their bioregion, get more people on it, tell more people to join it, all this. So we kind of just like game it to say like, hey, get more people involved, you're going to get more value, which then you can deliver towards regenerating your environment and giving regenerative loans to, finance regenerative development, and start collectively buying up assets so you can move towards this, cooperatively owned future. Because I think that's kind of how we get to that transition of this centralized ownership to, kind of no ownership. Because if we all own everything, then no one owns anything, right? So that's like the extreme idea of this. But as people start collectively buying up assets, we can start restoring the commons, slowly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so I've touched on a couple ideas there, some things for evolution to be able to bring this to where we need it to actually be able to test these assumptions. Nick, what would be really great to pair with Augusto and Sebastian is to make sure that these are actually plugging into our contracts so that the simulations we're running here, they're not, happening in the dark. They're actually based on what our real contracts are saying. But yeah, that's kind of it. I mean, I did touch on some really core, really big ideas. So now we can kind of just shift into, general discussion about the economic model.
Yeah.
If anyone has
great.
any thoughts or
Cool.
questions on that. Because I made a few assumptions there. Does everyone believe them all?
The what? No, it will be a good experiment to see if that really works, but it's a pretty good approach. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
it's really good.
I just really like to see this in, like, what's going to be the first community you're going to, you think is going to pilot this? Somewhere in Bali with...
Actually, no. What we're working with right now is actually on a government level in Costa Rica. So we have 2 bioregions that we've hand selected there that are really ripe for this. We have one bioregion in Guatemala, we have one in the Caribbean, and we have one in New York. So these are all that are from several network alliances that we're working with. And these are some of the first pilot projects we're going to run. And they cover a wide diversity of different groups and interest groups between them. So they've already come onto the board, and we've got leaders on the ground that are ready to do this. So, I mean, they're ready to go now. This is something I thought was going to actually take a couple months before we would have a bioregion up, but given this crisis, they're like, kind of desperate for it. So yeah, these pilots will be underway as soon as we can give it to them. And since we just went public with the app, that's going to be starting nowish. So we can start seeing these community pilots get underground within the next couple of weeks. And
the cycle is going to be what? So I grow carrots, and then I go and sell them in the farmer's market, and that the person that is buying them. So can you just walk me through a cycle of seeds?
Could you ask the question a different way?
So how is that the economy closing its loop? So I'm gonna be paying with seeds, right, to a farmer's market that is growing carrots and it's part of this network. And then
sure. So there's a couple ways. One way, given our current situation, is really potent. So depression and a recession is most devastating when there's just not enough money to go around. It's not that everyone decided to just get lazy, stop doing things, stop creating value. It's that there's just not money to facilitate those exchanges. That's the most devastating aspect, especially with areas that are focused on tourism. They're used to outside money, i.e. dollars, euros, these stronger currencies coming in and financing those communities, right? So they're used to this flow of different type of currency coming in. We can actually replace that flow. So that flow dried up of that foreign money coming in, this seeds could be that new foreign money. So we could actually just seamlessly step in. And that's why this is such a golden opportunity right now. But either way, what that looks like is on the ground community leaders, we give them a BDC and they are governing where money is going to. So they're giving out loans, and those people are like getting other people who, they're out of work. No one's paying them in their local currency because that's kind of dried up. So they say, hey, I'll pay you for your work, and here's these seeds. They're worth this much money. And they're like, okay. And then these agreements continue on. So then they just buy their next thing with seeds, and everyone's just accepting that seeds have value. We're going to bootstrap these, and this is what we're doing in Costa Rica, is using public and private funds to guarantee an exchange rate to build that initial trust.
Got it. Yeah.
Back the currency so that they can go and turn it into their local currency. And they're like, okay, I get it. But one, seeds is better than free. People are building their contribution scores for exchanging in seeds. So we just made it better than the local currency. And 2, as our economy is growing, they're actually growing in value relative to those national currencies. especially during this crisis where national currencies are inflating the crap out of their national currency to fund stimuluses. We'll see that we'll actually take on a greater increase in value, because in these initial stages, seed is actually fixed in supply. Yeah. So that as our economy is growing relative to other currencies, the value is going to be going up. So what we just said is like, hey, there's an incentive to hold on to this currency. There's an incentive for you to use it for exchanges. So it's actually so much better for you to not leave the seeds ecosystem than to leave it. But we give them that option initially just to build that initial trust. And we imagine that we could reduce the reserve ratio, pretty quickly actually, but we are going to reduce it over time, so that at the beginning it might be like 90% backed. So there's a pool of the local currency sitting there to for 90% of that money to be able to transfer out. But we'll drop that reserve ratio to like 80, 70, 60 as people get more used to using seeds. And then eventually we're just going to take the reserve ratio away altogether, and it's just open exchange where people are going to be able to exit and enter. But we do need that bootstrapping period to like just build the trust. And that's what we're doing with the pilot, the Caribbean, Costa Rica, and New York, is we're going to actually have them, backed that way to get the bootstrap going.
And the fiat backup is what, that answers my question, because that lets you close that loop of, if you cannot buy something in seeds, then you can just exchange it and you're good to.
Sure. But our primary focus is on the storytelling, and that's what we really need to nail, is not that this is just a temporary solution that, okay, I get seeds and then I exchange them out, but we really need to educate the value on how much seeds are better, how much voice you get when you didn't have a say before, how these are retaining their value stronger than that other system. So it is really important that we're doing that storytelling so that they don't just, cash out, but they realize, hey, this is something that is mine. I'm a part of it. I have a voice now. It's transparent. It's not exploiting value anymore. And it's like driving value towards the regeneration of my planet. Yes, this just makes sense. So instead of going and telling that store, the corner store who doesn't accept seeds yet, now they're going to be like, hey, would you accept seeds? Please accept seeds. I'm not going to buy from you unless you accept seeds. And this is us actually making sure we're working with local leaders, which is what we're doing in these pilot projects, that already have a lot of social credibility to get the corner stores and everyone to like actually adopt this as a method of payment. But again, that bootstrapping is important. So that corner store is like, yeah, I know I can cash out into the local currency. Sure, I'll accept seeds. But then as they just start using seeds, realize the benefit themselves, they'll cash out less. Again, that's an assumption that hopefully these pilots prove, but that's what we're sitting with right now.
Got it. Thank you for the explanation right here.
Yeah, no problem. Nick, got anything?
Oh, no, this sounds really great, actually. Sounds wonderful.
Yeah, great. Jeff, you're still here?
I am, yeah. My biggest economic questions is where, I know we've chatted about bonding curves before. Do you, can you remind me where those would come into the seeds model, where they would have a role to play? Or is that sort of a later phase of the Can you hear me okay?
Hello?
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you now.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did my question come through before? Maybe my headphones are being funny. Or maybe
I didn't quite hear I didn't hear the question. Like, it's about
the question was around the role that bonding curves will play in the seeds economic system. Is it being funny? Let me try joining again.
Nick, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, Reiki, can you hear me? I think
Reiki's muted.
Reiki's the one that.
Oh, no, he's not muted.
But I don't think he.
Maybe he just.
Yeah.
Maybe he disappeared.
Yeah, I think it's Reiki. Can you hear us, Jeff?
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, Jeff.
No, I can hear.
Can you hear me?
Reiki is the one that we can hear.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Voila.
All right.
Well, either way, I heard your question, Jeff.
Okay.
Bonding
cool.
curves, where do they fit into seeds?
Yeah.
I'm not sure, and I don't necessarily know where or how into the seeds model per se, but that's something that we're looking at in Haifa, because I see the bonding curve as really potent in, and definitely correct me if I'm wrong, in setting more up like an equity. So it's meant to still continue to kind of like increase in value over time. Why our seeds isn't necessarily backed by anything like the bonding curve does back it. So this is where this whole entire economic model comes into play, is like how we're growing new currency. So we're not necessarily growing new currency when new value comes into the system per se. We're growing new currency when there's new demand for it. So this is in lieu of a bonding curve in our, the seeds model.
Right.
But in the Haifa model where we're doing equity, I definitely see there being a very powerful role in giving communities that ability to do bonding curves and guarantee that their equity token has liquidity for it and all of that.
Gotcha. Cool. So it won't necessarily be touching seeds at all, but more on the Haifa side.
Yeah, where I see, seeds adapting some of the common stack stuff is in those governance tools, like the conviction voting or covalescent voting, and different ways of being able to find consensus and agreement. I think that's awesome, and I would love to continue to bring those insights into here.
Nice.
Yeah.
Sure.
That's something else also that
was
was
to come.
totally open for and wanting to support is more diversity. So yeah, we have seeds, but we're not even trying to say seeds is the one token to rule them all. What I'd like is that, we give the ability for bioregions to, create their own tokens, and they might create a token using token bonding curves and stuff. And we can facilitate that in our passport and stuff. So I love diversity. I think diversity is what's going to create really robust and resilient ecosystems. So, nothing about seeds is saying this is the one token to rule them all and we don't like you if you use something else. What we're saying is like, hey, there's a lot of incentives to use this and it gives you value if you do, but hey, here's some other ways to do other stuff. And maybe you might find out things that are really great that we can adopt and vice versa. So.
Cool. Yeah, that could be a useful way. Bonding curves are mostly looked at in a financial light at the moment, but definitely can provide liquidity between seeds and any, if there were regional tokens or any other smaller level or higher level tokens, it can be an interface, value interface between seeds and any other currencies that are launched in this ecosystem or other ecosystems as well. So it can be definitely a good value bridge.
Interesting. Okay, so we're talking about, so this is two things that are happening with our pilots. One in Costa Rica, this is awesome. Either way, the idea is that I'm planting this because this is good to get out there. Governments right now, they want to give stimulus packages to their, it doesn't matter. We get public money, we get $1 million, we put it into a bank. Can we use the token bonding curve to then dictate how many seeds are getting put into circulation and how that reserve ratio actually decreases over time? Because I think that's a function of token bonding curves, that the reserve ratio is decreasing as they're taking like more and more seeds out of that.
Yeah. So
tokens,
that's how the Bancor system is set up. It would definitely depend on your system design if you wanted to alter the reserve ratio depending on, like with the first augmented bonding curve we're putting out, the reserve ratio won't change, but that's definitely a feature that can be included in next generation bonding curves, is altering the reserve ratio based on the reserve you have and the value in the seed ecosystem for sure.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I would see as being really valuable to help bootstrap those bioregions and give them more liquidity, or at least guaranteed liquidity rather. But yeah, that's where I could see them kind of fitting in.
Cool.
What else you got?
And then on the conviction voting side, one update from our end is we're hoping to do a very low tech implementation just to field test the conviction voting functionality, and basically starting in spreadsheets. We're going to dog food it in our own team just with a very small number of people in terms of allocating budgets. And then we are hoping that will turn into kind of a pre-blockchain conviction voting even JavaScript app. So there may be some stuff to play with on conviction voting before we actually get to the full solidity component, which might take another year or so before we get all the smart contracts done. But there may be some early prototype, proof of concept type things. So I'll keep you in the loop on that if that's useful for you guys to play with and see.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, definitely the learning from governance that can come out of all that. That's, you know, the true value right now is all that wisdom.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic.
Experiments.
Well, this is great, guys. Nice little overview today. This is cool because this is a good foundation of what this tool is meant to do and some of the assumptions we've made. So I think the next economics call we pull together could be more broad. I know some other ideas were brought up in the Telegram chat of different ways of doing it, like backing the token and stuff. So I do want to get into some of those like more philosophical questions and, you know, really honing and stress testing this model before we, you know, put too much energy and value into it. So let's try to collect more wisdom. So maybe that's the shape of the next call. It could be more around that.